President Trump is out with a new executive order aiming to slash drug prices by at least 50%. The plan won't be limited to Medicare prescriptions, but will also target medications covered by Medicaid and private insurance. Weight loss drugs are expected to be on the list. FDA Commissioner Dr. Makary joining me now. Good to see you. Let's talk about Trump's last attempt at this when he was in the Oval. How is this time any different? And how do you know it's going to work this time around?
Well, good to see you, Kira. No one has put a proposal this bold out there before. This gives incredible authority to the U.S. Trade Representative, to CMS, to DOJ, to FDA, where I'm at, to do everything possible with regulatory and policy authority to get this done. Now, we're starting by asking the companies to create a more level playing field with drug prices among wealthy nations in the world, in the OECD countries in the world. Because if you bought a car for $100,000 and found out it's $10,000 in London all day long, you'd say, this doesn't seem right, and can somebody talk to the car maker and see if they can negotiate a more level playing field? And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for the best price in wealthy countries here in the United States for Americans, as they're already available for Germans and the French and the British.
All right, I'm going to get to the more of an even playing field in a second. But how are you going to make pharmaceutical companies comply with this order? Because, you know, Big Pharma makes 70% of its profits in the U.S.
That's right. We're financing the R&D for the world. And the president does not like it when Americans are getting ripped off, when we're paying a massively disproportionate share, be it NATO or WHO fees or tariffs or anything else. The president does not like it when Americans are getting ripped off. So I've seen it as a physician, as a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins for over 20 years. It ruins lives, and none of us took an oath to take care of somebody and heal them of their disease and then ruin their life financially. And that's what's going on. We have to call this out as price gouging. And we're going to start by asking the companies, and we're going to appeal to their better nature. They know about this disparity. And for a long time, other countries have been laughing at the United States for paying these higher fees. So it is front and center, and you're going to see all of these agencies within the executive branch make this a priority. Certainly, we're going to do that at the FDA.
So how do you make them comply, Commissioner?
Well, we start off by asking, and we've got a lot of carrots and sticks. We pay for a lot of medications at Medicare. We have, at the FDA, have a lot of incentives for pharmaceutical companies. We have relationships with pharmaceutical companies. We have the ability to grant drug importation waivers to states. And there's a lot of things. The Federal Trade Representative is going to use their authority to ensure that we have a more level playing field. So if we all work together in synchrony, organized with a central effort in this administration, we can actually make a difference. You know, a lot of presidents talked about doing this, but came short of any announcement. Bill Clinton talked about doing this. Obama talked about doing this. George W. Bush was interested in this idea for a short time. But today we saw a bold announcement that I hope is going to lower drug prices for everyday Americans, because when you have price gouging, creating prohibitively high prices, that's an access problem. All of a sudden, everyday Americans cannot get the treatments they need.
What if Big Pharma says, we're just going to charge everybody more?
Well, look, it takes two to dance, and we have relationships with the pharmaceutical companies. I can tell you that in conversations, they recognize that this doesn't make sense. Americans recognize that this does not make sense. So I think you're going to see some bold actions that we've never seen before.
So the House tried to pass a version of this year. The 2020 version was struck down in court. So why do you believe this version can actually stand up?
Well, that was a watered-down version, and that was one court. And many politicians come into office realizing it makes no sense for an American to pay 15 times more for the exact same pill that people are taking in London. And so many politicians faced with this dilemma decide, do I side with Big Pharma and the lobby interests, or do I side with everyday Americans? And politicians, by and large, have sided with the lobbyists. And that's where we are today in America. This president is showing leadership here in doing what's right. And I think it's going to be very popular. If you look at the polling on drug pricing for everyday Americans, this solution, the most favored nation status pricing, is extremely popular. That is, we in the United States should be entitled to the same price that wealthy countries in Europe get for the same medication.
Well, when you think of, lots of countries have a centralized healthcare system. The U.S. does not. So how does Big Pharma apply, a pricing system for countries with socialized medicine to a country like ours? How do you make that work?
Well, 70% of the revenue that goes to profits at pharma comes from the United States. 30% comes from the entire rest of the world combined. And I think people look at that disparity and say, can we sit down with Big Pharma and try to come up with a better solution? I think this is something you're going to see movement on where we've never seen movement before.
So how soon do you think folks can expect to see a difference in price?
We're going to go to work. We're not wasting time. Many of us are very passionate about this topic. I've spent much of my research career calling out price gouging in healthcare. Financial toxicity is a medical complication, and billing quality and pricing quality is a form of medical quality. So we can't ignore the giant disparities in access to care that these prices create. So I'm going to go to work right away. There's incredible enthusiasm in the health leadership. You saw today, I stood there with Mehmet Oz from CMS and Jay Bhattacharya from the NIH and with Robert F. Kennedy from HHS and the president. And so you're seeing some pretty united passion on this topic of drug pricing.
One more question, Commissioner. DOJ cuts. FDA lost a lot of its workforce, including top food safety regulators. How are you going to reassure all of us that our drugs and our food will be safe with fewer inspectors?
Well, look, public safety is our #1 task, and I think the narrative on the cuts has really been misleading because the context is that we have not cut scientific reviewers or food inspectors at the FDA, despite reports out there. Sometimes they're cheap shot reports that are put out there. We did cut communications, IT staff, and some of our lobbyists to Capitol Hill in a massive consolidation. But any discussion of cuts should recognize the context that the FDA doubled in size. There was a 100% increase in the number of employees at the FDA since 2007, just before these cutbacks. And these cutbacks are still less than the cutbacks implemented percentage-wise by Bill Clinton when he was president. So we're going to have a smarter, more efficient FDA. Has the doubling in the number of employees at the FDA increased the speed of these decisions and reviews and approvals and cures getting to Americans? No, it hasn't. We've got to do things smarter and more efficiently.
FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Kira.